He left it on the kitchen counter. That was the only reason I found it. One moment of carelessness. 1 second where he forgot that secrets have weight, and weight leaves things behind. It was a black phone. Older model. Nothing special. The kind of thing you'd buy at a gas station with cash if you didn't want a record. I'd never seen it before in my life. And I had been married to this man for 6 years. I stood there in my kitchen at 7:14 in the morning, still in my pajamas, coffee in one hand, staring at a device that had no business existing. Marcus was in the shower. The water was running. I had maybe 4 minutes. I picked it up. No password. That should have told me everything right there. A man who keeps a secret phone but doesn't lock it is a man who never believed he'd get caught. That kind of arrogance isn't just careless. It's contempt. It means he looked at me every single day and thought, she'll never know. She doesn't have it in her. The first app one opened was the messaging app. There were 147 conversations. I counted. I'm not telling you I counted them later, calmly, with a clear head. I'm telling you I stood there in my kitchen and counted them in real time, my coffee going cold, my hands starting to shake, because my brain refused to process what my eyes were telling it without some kind of anchor. Without a number. Numbers are real. 147 is real. Some of the names were just initials. Some were clearly fake: gym girl, coffee shop, work. Some had photos in the contact card. Young women. Beautiful women. Women who had no idea that the man texting them had a wife at home who made him breakfast every Sunday and laughed at his jokes and trusted him with the softest parts of herself. I scrolled. I scrolled until my thumb went numb. And then I hit a name that stopped me so completely that I forgot how to breathe. The name in the contact was just a single letter. M. But the profile photo was my mother's face. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Marcus Ellery was the kind of man who walked into a room and made it feel smaller, not because he was loud, but because he was magnetic. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. Who held doors open not because he was raised to, but because he understood that small gestures create large debts of feeling. He was deliberate. Everything Marcus did was deliberate. I met him at my cousin Priya's wedding. He was a groomsman. I was a bridesmaid. He danced badly on purpose so I would laugh, and I laughed, and he smiled like he'd just won something he'd been trying for a long time. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, got married in October, in a vineyard, with fairy lights, and my mother crying in the front row, and my father shaking Marcus's hand like he was passing something precious to him. Like Marcus was trustworthy enough to carry it. My mother adored him. That's important. My mother, Dana Weiss, 61 years old, recently divorced from my father after 32 years of marriage. My mother, who had been shattered by that divorce in ways she'd never fully let me see. Who had rebuilt herself slowly, painfully, the way you rebuild a house after a fire. Not the same as before, but standing. Who called Marcus her bonus son. Who texted him memes. Who asked his advice about her retirement account. My mother, whose face was on a secret phone my husband had never told me existed. I opened the conversation. The most recent message was from 3 days ago. Marcus, can't stop thinking about last Tuesday. M. My mother, had replied. Then don't. 3 words. Then don't. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I didn't decide to sit. My legs made the decision for me. The water was still running upstairs. I had maybe 2 minutes left. I kept reading. I read backwards, the way you read a disaster, starting at the wreckage, working your way toward the moment before impact. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months of thinking about you, and when can I see you, and last night was, and I need to see you again, and details I will not repeat because some things, once put into words out loud, cannot be unheard. 8 months. My mother's divorce had been finalized 9 months ago. 1 month. She had waited 1 month. The water shut off. I put the phone back on the counter exactly where I'd found it. I poured my cold coffee down the drain. I stood at the sink with my back to the door, and I arranged my face into something that looked like a normal Tuesday morning. Marcus came downstairs in a gray t-shirt and joggers, his hair still damp. He kissed my cheek. He smelled like my shampoo because he always used mine, and it used to make me laugh. Morning, he said. Morning, I said. He picked up the phone off the counter, slipped it into his pocket. Just like that. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I handed him a cup of coffee I'd just made, and I watched him drink it, and I thought, how long can a person stand inside a burning building before they feel the heat? I didn't confront him that day. I know. I can already hear some of you. You're sitting there thinking, why didn't she say something? Why didn't she throw the coffee in his face and blow the whole thing open right then? And look, I understand that reaction. Part of me wanted exactly that. The loud, explosive, cinematic version of this moment. The version where I become the righteous woman who doesn't take a single breath before she burns everything down. But that's not how I work. And here's my flaw, the one you need to know about me. I am a planner. I have always been a planner. Even when I'm bleeding, I make a list. Even when the world is ending, I need information before I act. It's not always a virtue. Sometimes it looks like weakness. Sometimes it is weakness. But it's mine, and it's real. And on that Tuesday morning at midnight, I made a decision that would haunt me for months afterward. I decided to know everything before I did anything. I called in sick to work. First time in 3 years. I sat in my car in a parking garage 2 miles from my house, and I let myself fall apart for exactly 45 minutes. I set a timer. I cried until the timer went off, and then I stopped. I washed my face with a water bottle I found in the back seat. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and I said, out loud, to my own reflection, "You are going to know the truth before you do a single thing." Then I started working. I hired a private investigator that same afternoon. His name was Terrell, and he had the kind of face that made you feel like he'd already seen every terrible thing the world had to offer and survived it without flinching. He charged $400 a day, and he didn't ask me why I needed to know what I needed to know. He just asked me what I already had. I told him about the phone, about the messages, about my mother. He didn't react. I told him the 8 months of dates I'd noticed in the messages, the times, the shorthand references to hotels and restaurants I'd recognized. He took notes. One question, he said. I waited. Do you want to know everything, or do you want to know enough? I didn't understand the difference at first. Then I did. Everything would mean the full picture. Every name, every woman, all 147 threads pulled apart and examined. It would mean understanding the full scope of who my husband was. Enough meant just what I needed to end the marriage with legal and financial security. Just the evidence. Just the facts. I said, everything. He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He just stood up, shook my hand, and left. That night I came home and cooked dinner. Pasta. Marcus's favorite. I opened a bottle of wine, and I set the table, and I sat across from the man I'd married, and I asked him about his day. He talked for 40 minutes. He was charming. He was funny. He told a story about a meeting that had gone sideways and made me laugh twice. I laughed twice. I still feel something about that. Terrell came back to me 4 days later with a folder. I opened it in my car. There were 12 women. 12 active, ongoing situations across the 147 contacts. The rest were previous. Some had lasted weeks. Some months. The longest, not my mother, had been going on for 2 years. 2 years. We'd been married 6. That means he'd been doing this for 2/3 of our marriage. But here's what Terrell told me that I hadn't been prepared for. Your mother isn't the only person you know on this list. I looked up. He slid a second sheet across the console. There were 3 names I recognized. My best friend Layla's younger sister. A woman from my book club. And a name I won't say, because she has children, and I believe she didn't fully know what she was involved in. But Layla's sister knew. Layla's sister had been introduced to Marcus at my birthday party 4 years ago. At a party I threw for myself. In my own home. I sat with that for a long time. I called Layla that night from a grocery store parking lot at 9:47 p.m. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would be shaking. But there's a kind of fury that goes so cold it stops trembling. It just becomes still. She answered on the second ring. Hey, what's up? Does your sister know Marcus is married? Silence. For full seconds of silence. Nadia, does she know? It wasn't a question anymore. I told her to stop, Layla said. 6 months ago, I told her to stop. I didn't know how to tell you. I was trying to make it stop without blowing up your life. I hung up. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then I drove home. But that wasn't the worst phone call I had to make. The worst one was still coming. And I kept putting it off, because once I made it, there was no version of the future where everything wasn't different. The worst part about what Terrell told me wasn't the number. It wasn't even the betrayal of Layla's silence, though that cut in its own particular way. The worst part was the pattern he described. Marcus had a type, and the type wasn't physical. The type was emotional. Every woman in that folder, every single one, was going through something. A divorce, a breakup, a loss, a period of vulnerability and loneliness that made her more available, more grateful, more easy to hold without commitment. Marcus had a radar for pain. He found women at their lowest and arrived like sunlight. Warm, attentive, the kind of present that felt like salvation. My mother had been divorced for 1 month when he first texted her. 1 month. And I thought about all the times I talked to Marcus about how worried I was about her. How lonely she seemed. How the divorce had guttered something in her that I didn't know how to relight. I'd shared her pain with him, sitting in our bed with a lamp on, trusting him with my fears because that's what you do with the person you've chosen. He had used every single word I gave him. He had used my love for my mother to find his way in. That was the moment I threw up. Not the discovery. Not the photos. Not the timeline. That was the moment. She didn't know he was sleeping with her daughter's husband. And when I told her, she asked me not to ruin what they had. I called my mother on a Thursday afternoon. I drove to her apartment. I didn't tell her I was coming. I just showed up at her door with a paper bag of the croissants she likes from the bakery 2 blocks over, because I needed something in my hands, and because some part of me still wanted to take care of her even as I drove to shatter her. She opened the door in her reading glasses. She looked surprised. Happy. She hugged me. I let her. We sat at her kitchen table. She poured tea. The light was coming through her curtains the way it always does in the afternoon. That particular golden hour light that used to make me feel like her apartment was a safe place. I put my phone on the table between us. I had taken screenshots. I had evidence. I was a planner, remember? I watched my mother's face as she read. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. The exact sequence of her expressions. First confusion, then recognition, something she saw in the messages that only she would understand, a reference, a phrase, something that confirmed to her that these were real. Then a color that rose in her face that wasn't shame. It took me a moment to name it. It was anger. She was angry. At me. Why did you go through his phone? I said nothing. Nadia, you had no right. Mom, to go through someone's private. Mom, stop. She stopped. I looked at her across the table that I'd sat at 100 times. The table where I'd done homework as a teenager. The table where she'd told me she was getting divorced. He is my husband, I said. She looked away. I know, she said, quietly. Did you know he was married when it started? A pause. Too long. He said it was over. I closed my eyes. He said it was over. The oldest sentence in the history of infidelity, spoken across kitchen tables and parking lots and hotel rooms since the beginning of time. He said it was over. And she had believed it, because she had needed to believe it, because she was lonely and she was wounded, and he was warm and present, and he'd paid attention to her in a way that felt like water after a drought. I understood. That was the devastating thing. I understood. He lied to you, I said. I know that now. He wasn't ending the marriage. He was never going to end the marriage. You were one of 12. I watched that land. She went very still. One of 12. Active, ongoing. 147 total. She put her hand over her mouth. We sat in silence for a long time. I thought she was going to cry. I thought this was the moment where she collapsed into grief and guilt, and I would have to decide whether to hold her or walk out. I thought that was the choice I was sitting here to make. But then she lowered her hand, and she said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I don't want to lose him. 3 words. The wrong 3. I stood up. I picked up my phone. I walked to her door. She called my name. I turned around. She was still sitting at the table. She looked small. She looked like a woman who knew she had done something she could not undo, and was hoping, actually hoping, that love was a force strong enough to survive being this ugly. I'm not choosing him over you, she said. I'm not ready to give up something that made me feel. Don't, I said. Nadia, I need you to hear me. I'm not angry at you for being lonely. I'm not even angry at you for not knowing. But if you ask me to protect him, or to be quiet, or to let this continue, then you are choosing him over me, whether you call it that or not. She didn't say anything. I left. I confronted Marcus that same night. I planned to wait. I had planned to have the lawyer ready, the accounts separated, the exit strategy clean. But after my mother's kitchen, I had nothing left in me that wanted to be strategic. He was on the couch when I got home, watching television, shoes off, glass of water on the coffee table, the absolute ordinary ease of a man with no idea that his life was about to change shape. I stood in the doorway. He looked up. Hey, he said. You okay? You look pale. I found your phone. The television kept playing. 3 seconds. 4. He reached for the remote and turned it off. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when the air pressure changes. When something large and invisible has just walked in. Which phone? He said. Not a denial. Which phone? I looked at him. I looked at the man I'd watched sleep for 6 years. The man who had danced badly at my cousin's wedding so I would laugh. The man who had held my hand at my grandfather's funeral. The man who had used every secret I trusted him with as a tool to find his way into other women's lives. The black one, I said. The one with 147 women, including my mother. He put the glass of water down. He said, I was going to tell you. And I laughed. I'm not proud of it. It was not a pretty laugh. It was the kind of laugh that sounds like it's made of something other than humor. Something harder. Were you? I said. It's complicated. It's not, actually. None of this is complicated. He stood up. He started to say something about needs and distance and the way the marriage had shifted, and I stopped him. Don't, I said. Don't do the thing where this becomes about something I failed to give you. Don't make me sit here and watch you build a case. I've seen the messages. I know what you said to my mother. I know what you told her about us. I know the version of me that you sold to every woman in that phone to make yourself the hero of the story. He went quiet. You told them I was cold, I said. You told them I worked too much. You told them we hadn't been close in years. You told my mother that you stayed because you felt responsible for me. He looked at the floor. Marcus, look at me. He looked up. Did any of it feel like love? Any of it? A pause. Yes, he said. Some of it. Which part? You. In the beginning. I nodded. I believed him. That was the cruelest thing about Marcus. The beginning was real. The man I fell in love with was a real man who had loved me with something genuine. And somewhere along the way, he had chosen something else, again and again and again, and had never once stopped to tell me, so I could choose differently too. Pack a bag, I said. You can come back for the rest when I'm not here. He didn't argue. That surprised me. He went upstairs. I stood in the living room alone and I stared at the television screen, dark and reflective, and I saw my own face looking back at me, and I thought, is this what I look like now? Is this the face of after? He came back down 20 minutes later with a duffel bag. He stopped at the door. Nadia, don't. He left. I thought that was the end. I thought once the door closed, the story closed with it. I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't losing Marcus. The hardest part was what came next with my mother. 6 weeks passed. My mother called 14 times. I answered twice. Both conversations were short. She cried. I didn't. I'd already done my crying, in timed sessions, in parking lots, with a water bottle and a timer. By the time I answered her calls, I had run out of the kind of grief that sounds like anything. Layla came to my apartment on a Saturday with wine and takeout, and an apology that was genuinely sorry and also genuinely not enough. We sat on my floor because I'd moved the couch to a different wall and hadn't moved it back yet, and she told me that her sister had cut contact with Marcus immediately after everything came out, that she felt sick, that she hadn't known the full picture. I believed her. About her sister. I was less sure about Layla. I didn't say that to her face. I sat on my floor and I accepted the wine, and I let her hold my hand, and I thought about the fact that she had known for 6 months and had made the choice to protect her sister's secret over my right to know the truth about my own marriage. I thought about how love makes us do the math wrong, how we calculate the cost of a secret and decide the wrong person should pay it. We are still friends. Differently. The way a bone that breaks heals stronger in the fracture, but you always know where it broke. The divorce was filed 8 weeks after the night I told Marcus to leave. He didn't fight it. He got an apartment 20 minutes away, and I know this because my city is not as big as it sometimes feels, and I drove past it once at 10:58 p.m. on a night when I couldn't sleep, and I sat outside for 7 minutes staring at a lit window on the 3rd floor and wondering what version of his story he was telling himself inside. Then I drove home. I'm not proud of the drive-by, but I'm also not ashamed of it. It was human. It was the behavior of someone trying to verify that a thing is real by looking at it directly. I needed to see the building. I needed to know it existed. I needed to know that he was somewhere and I was somewhere else, and that those two somewheres were not the same place anymore. My mother and I didn't speak for 4 months. 4 months is a long time when you've talked to someone almost every day of your life. She reached out on a Sunday evening. A text, not a call. 6 words. Can I come over? I'm sorry. I stared at it for 2 hours. I said yes. She came over with nothing in her hands. No croissants. No wine. Nothing to fill the silence or soften it. She sat down on my couch, and she looked at me, and she said, I ended it the same night you left my apartment. I nodded. I want you to know that I know what I did. I'm not going to explain it or justify it or ask you to understand it. I just want you to know that I know. I looked at my mother, 61 years old, a woman who had built a life and watched it come apart and had reached for the first warm thing she found without stopping to check what she was reaching toward. A woman who had made a catastrophic choice. A woman who was also my mother, and who had been my person for 33 years before this, and who would be my person for however many years came after. I thought about what she had said in her kitchen. I don't want to lose him. And I thought about the fact that she had still ended it. The same night I walked out. That the thing that had looked like a choice to protect him had actually been a woman in freefall who hadn't landed yet. And when she landed facing me. I thought about all of this. And then I thought about something harder. I thought about whether I would have done better if I had been her. 61 and freshly alone and shattered by the death of a 32-year marriage, and someone warm and attentive had appeared and offered something that felt like being chosen again. Would I have asked the right questions? Would I have looked for the exits in the story he was telling me? I wanted to say yes. I'm not entirely sure. I know, I said. She started to cry. I let her. Then I went to sit next to her. Not because everything was okay. Not because it was forgiven and done. But because she was my mother and she was crying, and some part of me, the same part that makes me plan and list and survive, also knows that the people we love are going to fail us in ways we never anticipated, and we have to decide, not once, but continuously, as a daily practice, what we're going to do with that. We didn't hug that night. We just sat, close enough to feel each other's presence. That was enough for then. It is a strange thing to lose a marriage and not lose yourself. I expected to feel smaller after Marcus left. I expected his absence to reveal some hollow at the center of me that he'd been filling. But that's not what happened. What happened was that I had more room, more quiet, more access to the specific frequency of my own thinking that had been crowded out by 6 years of adjusting myself to the shape of someone else. I missed him. I won't pretend I didn't. I missed the version of him that was real. The early version. The man who danced badly at my cousin's wedding. I miss that man the way you miss a place you love that no longer exists, not with the hope of return, but with the specific grief of something genuinely gone. But I did not miss the marriage. The marriage had been a slow leak for years, and I hadn't had the language for it. And Marcus had taken that silence and filled it with 147 other women instead of turning toward me and saying, "We are losing each other. What do we do about that?" That was his choice. One morning, about 5 months after Marcus left, I was sitting at the kitchen counter with my coffee, the same counter where the black phone had been sitting, and I realized I had been sitting there for 20 minutes just thinking. Not planning, not organizing, just thinking, watching the light move. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that before. Maybe never. I thought about my mother, about what she'd said. I don't want to lose what they had. I thought about what it means to want something bad for you. I thought about how wanting something and deserving it and being good enough for it are three completely different things that we spend our whole lives confusing for each other. I thought about Marcus in his third-floor apartment. I thought about the women who didn't know they were one of 12. I thought about the women who did know and chose it anyway. I thought about all the quiet compromises we make for love, the ones that seem small when we make them and enormous when we count them up at the end. I thought about Layla's 6 months of silence. I thought about my own silence, standing in that kitchen with cold coffee in my hand and my face arranged into something that looked like a Tuesday morning. Was I wrong to wait? To gather? To plan instead of explode? I still don't know. I have asked myself that question so many times that it has worn a groove in me, a regular path in my thinking, like a river shaping a canyon. And every time I walk that path, I arrive at the same place. I don't know if I handled it right. I know I survived it. I know my mother and I are still talking, slowly, carefully, rebuilding something that will never be the same shape as what it was, but might be its own kind of true. I know that Layla and I are still friends. Differently. I know that I sleep better alone than I slept in that bed for the last 3 years of my marriage. And I know this. Betrayal is not always a stranger who breaks down your door. Sometimes it wears a face you've loved for 30 years and sits at your kitchen table and drinks tea. Sometimes it says I love you every morning and means it in some partial way that isn't enough but feels real enough that you keep reaching for it. Sometimes it is quiet and slow and doesn't announce itself until you're already standing in the wreckage. And sometimes the hardest question isn't whether you can forgive the person who betrayed you. Sometimes the hardest question is whether you can forgive yourself for not seeing it sooner, for laughing at his jokes in the middle of it, for making breakfast on Sundays, for trusting someone with the softest parts of yourself and discovering, too late, that trust is not armor and love is not proof of anything. I don't have an answer. I'm 33 years old and I don't have an answer. I'm sitting in my kitchen with my coffee going cold and the light moving and I am thinking, not planning, just thinking. And I am wondering, if the person you loved most did the thing you could least forgive, not an enemy, not a stranger, but the closest person you have on earth, would you stay? Would you leave? Would you know the difference between healing and accepting what should not be accepted? And the question that keeps me up at night, the one I cannot shake, the one that followed me out of my mother's kitchen and into my car and into every room I've been in since. If Marcus had come to me 3 years ago and said, "I am not happy. I am reaching for things outside this marriage. I think I need something I don't know how to name." Would I have been able to hear it? Would we have been able to fix it? Or would I have done what most of us do? Would I have made a plan and kept going and told myself it would be fine? I think about that more than I think about the 147 women. I think about the conversation we never had. And I don't know what to do with that. I've been sitting with this story for months. I've talked to no one about the part one just told you, about whether I could have done anything differently, about whether the version of me who found that phone was the same woman who had somehow made a life that was already quietly ending. And I still don't know. I don't know if I was a good wife who was betrayed. I don't know if I was a wife who missed the signs and told herself not to look. I don't know if those things are mutually exclusive or if they are, in fact, the same story told from 2 different angles. What I know is that I found a phone on a kitchen counter. What I know is that I counted 147. What I know is that one of the names was the closest person I had on earth, and that she chose what she chose, and I chose what I chose, and we are both still here. Different, but here. I don't know what you do with that. I don't know if there's a verdict. I don't know if the jury of everyone listening to this right now could agree on who the villain is. Because when you look closely enough at any human story, the villain and the person you feel sorry for tend to start looking dangerously alike. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Not about Marcus. Not about my mother. Not about Layla. About you. If you found out that the person closest to you, not a stranger, not a coworker, the person you call when something goes wrong, had been carrying a secret for months that would change everything you thought you knew about your life, and they stayed silent to protect themselves or someone else, could you forgive them? Would you want to? And what would that say about the kind of love you believe you deserve? I've been thinking about this for months, and I still don't have a clean answer. Drop yours in the comments. I read every single one.